Sam say, sort of, it's, hey, right now these systems don't tell you a whole lot. My guess is accounting systems don't matter a whole lot to student outcomes at this point in time.
Yeah.
But we might be able to design a system where we can tell what are the places
exactly.
we can be more effective.
Exactly.
And I think that's sort of...
it's not only knowing that you're effective, it's knowing why.
Yeah, right. So you can say, look, if we can, and this, my other question was, sort of what the L is in LCAP. Why do you need to have a standardized system? Why can't local cities do it? And why don't you answer that now?
I have an answer for that. So even though the LCFF is placing the decision-making in a more local place, and the state is not trying to impose any rules in the local authorities, there is a high value of being able to see and make those numbers available to the public, so that one, the school districts are able to learn from each other, and two, the community is in general more involved in the decision-making process. For example, more parental involvement, or just more awareness of where the money is going to.
And to add on to that, in a more pragmatic sense, moving from a very standardized system that California had to an almost free-for-all system is a huge leap. And in an academic system that we have, in the education system that we have, having the entire state go 1 year from those very standardized accounts to a huge pot of money and not knowing what to do with it is a very tough thing to ask. And so when we talk to districts, there is this notion that many of them are still in this kind of compliance mode mindset because that's what they've been doing for decades past. And so the LCAP can be seen in a way as a medium in which to interpret some of those old style directives into broader goals.
So you talked a lot about tracking specifically where dollars go, and I think at one point you mentioned tracking specific instructional time. I'm wondering if you came across, or if you have any idea though, towards including some sort of measure of quality. Just because if you're spending a lot of money on buying a large quantity of something, or you're doing a lot, something doesn't actually necessarily mean anything about the quality. Maybe the thing you're spending least amount of money is actually the highest quality. So just in regards to again trying to predict this outcomes idea and tracking what's being spent on to those outcomes, how do you measure the quality as opposed to just focusing on where the most money is going?
Yeah.
I can take this one if you want. So yeah, that's the ultimate goal, and right now, we think the first step would be to dive just to we thought what we found out is subject matter is really important. Breaking down instruction by subject matter is very important. But to go to your end, Marguerite Rosa, researcher that we talked to, described you can have 2 librarians in 2 different schools, and on the accounting structure they're exactly the same, right? One is paid X, one's paid Y, and that they're librarians, but one spends her time doing cleaning books, and one actually spends time reading to the kids. That's really hard to kind of dive into because that's the ultimate challenge, right? That's really hard to dive into because then you have a principal agent issue that sometimes your accounting can't track. But we thought the first step would be just simply looking at how meager the California accounting code is just to break instruction down by subject matter. Before we're talking about quality, we want to see if they're actually making steps towards the goals rather than actually making the goals themselves. So that's more of that accountability. If we're going to say that if we're going to spend more in science, technology, and engineering and math, let's see you actually put dollars behind it. And we'll see if the quality is better with test scores. But first, let's hold you accountable to holding you out in the bargain. Margaret Rosa did a lot of research that actually showed that schools will say that they spend more on Common Core subjects, but they'll actually spend more on electives like foreign language and art. It's just by the nature of how instruction salaries go. This is in states like Washington, so California's not the only. So before we determine whether the quality of we're getting, we want to see if people are just in their right mind, or in what we all agree, they're taking the right steps to get there. We don't know what those right steps are, right? That's the hard part. But we we
Yeah,
can.
'cause my
we
question
can
is that like an efficient use of like very limited public resources? Because if you look at Finland, maybe the reason why they don't have high transparency or high specific details because they say, well, look, like we don't want you spending your time tracking, on a sheet of paper how many hours you're spending teaching a particular subject, trying to figure that out. We want you to spend your time actually teaching.
right.
And that's what's leading to those better outcomes. And so again, really, it's maybe a lack of such specific level detail that is allowing for higher outcomes at the end of the day.
Yeah, administrative burden is that is costly, and we totally understand that. But we think that like breaking down by subject matter is like a first step into, beginning to understand if we're spending in ways that we said we're going to spend. I mean, if it's the optimal amount, that's up for debate. That's like higher research, but we're just trying to open up information more to these administrators to see if they're making better choices.
And the other thing that I would add to that is just the system of the funding systems for education in different areas definitely influence kind of the importance placed on accounting in different areas. So in California specifically, so much of our funding is driven from the state as opposed to localities. Whereas in Massachusetts and Texas and in Pennsylvania, much of their funding comes from localities. So they don't have the same incentive from a top-down perspective to account for dollar what maybe California does.
The ultimate goal of an accounting system in terms of education should be to leverage behavior. That's what kind of a, we should move towards a system that allows you to understand what behaviors you are creating and then leverage the ones that you want to leverage, which is a completely different discussion. But the current system doesn't allow you to even understand where you're putting your money in terms of instruction. I don't know if that.
Can I ask a question? So, do you have an idea or a prediction on what your client's going to do with this? Is he or they going to use this to leverage behavior?
I think.
Or what's your sense?
We haven't discussed about this, so I'm going to say my opinion. I think what this is going to be useful for them is basically understand that the problem that they thought they had, it's a real problem not only in California but across states. Second, that maybe to get more convinced that the next step in terms of LCFF has to be some way of linking front end and back end, because nowadays basically everyone that we talk to says that there's like an opaque area that nobody really wants to dig in. Even Margaret Rosa, which I think is one of the prominent scholars in this field, says that her job is basically dig under the trash that school leave and then get the information that she needs to make this comparison and matching.
And in your report, you pointed to the fact that Texas has tried to do this essentially. I mean, Texas tried to connect the front and the back end, right? Am I mistaken?
Well,
that,
in spirit, I would say,
Okay.
not really.
But is it because they didn't really want to, or
I don't-
were there obstacles? I'm curious as to the
It's
reasons about how-
it's hard to make a causal relationship. I think it's because in 2007 there was less understanding of what this problem was all about, and there were no tools available. So the companies that Sam mentioned, Alvaro, Decision Labs, are from a year to now they have been companies appearing in this field. I think with big data and all the trend towards using data to make meaningful insights and good decisions, this is kind of changing towards the way that we envision it. But I don't know what you guys think. This is my opinion.
I think there's two fronts. I think both communities and state want to see the LCAP tied to something in the accounting codes, and I think the way to do that is subject matter right now, because a lot of these goals that are elucidated in the LCAP deal with instruction. It's implementation of Common Core, and they'll go over. We're going to spend $2.4 million teaching training teachers on these core subjects. Okay, well, parents want to see that done. The state has an interest to see that done because they used to have this compliance or these categorical formula that said you have to do this. The only people that I would see at that end that would halt it, like for political reasons, are teachers, because, like I mentioned in the prior, Margaret Rosa saw that schools were spending more money in foreign language than in math, and the reason for that is simply a lot of the teachers who are in math are younger, and in terms of that whole tenure process, they don't have as much of that salary. But foreign language teachers, because there's not many other options in terms of what you do with a foreign language as your expertise, you're not going to go. You might go, I don't know, to the State Department or something, but that's your option. You stay there for a long time, and they're accumulating more costs. So the teachers would probably see this as a way that's going to illuminate that they're part of this equation that they don't want to be. I don't know, something to that effect.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah, sure.
Not to keep hammering away at my
Please.
particular areas here. So it seems like part of this purpose is to just like kind of know what's going on, so that people can be better informed and make better school decisions. At the same time, this seems like a very like government-oriented kind of accounting method. I'm just wondering if there's like more innovative ways that we could do this, such as like market-based accountability, where we take California's free spending kind of situation, and now say in addition to this free spending, we're gonna institute an open enrollment system and let parents do the accounting or accountability piece instead of the government, and ultimately saying we're gonna take this decision out of the hands of government and out of the hands of policymakers who somehow we think may know better, and instead say parents, like, if you like where this school is spending their money on, then like go for it. So I'm wondering like why there's even I guess a need for this to be government based as opposed to something else.
Our project was inspired and guided by the requirements of our client, which is the State Board of Education.
That's a good answer.
I think that's a very interesting idea for this project.
But regarding, I mean, that's obviously a huge point, but actually the California Department of Education is not foreseeing, taking these numbers and imposing regulations on schools. They're just concerned about the transparency of the information, and then it might turn later on that once this information is transparent enough, actually maybe the parents will be the regulators, because I mean if the decision making process is kept at the local level and there's nothing for the state to do, but the parents have access to the information, they might change schools, change districts, or even go to the school and say, hey, I think you're doing this wrong. So that I think there is an application that can go in the direction you're mentioning.
And furthermore, in that same vein, that's partially why the LCAPs were created. LCAPs are designed to be community involved, and there is a required period of community review before they go to the district. And the question that we kind of sought to answer in a way is, how do we provide those communities, in that sense, with appropriate information? Can we inform those communities in a way of the appropriate practices or the effective practices of what the school is doing? A parent can say, "Oh, I like what you're doing here," or a parent can say, "I like what you're doing here, and I have data to back up why it's an effective thing, and we should be doing it more." And perhaps having a better accounting system would allow them to do that.
We should probably move on. Thank you.
Thank you guys.